Today I'm going to show you the family tree of Tim Walz, who was recently selected as Kamala Harris's running mate in the 2024 U.S. election. This means that if the Democrats win and Kamala Harris becomes the president, then Tim Walz will become the vice president. Currently, Walz serves as the governor of the state of Minnesota, which is located in a region of the U.S. known as the Midwest. Now, although there's no one agreed-upon definition of which states make up the U.S. Midwest, the core is usually thought of as being these 7 states, all of which happen to be located north of the Missouri and Ohio rivers. Interestingly, Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, also comes from the Midwest. He's from Ohio, where he currently serves as a U.S. Senator. So why did both Harris and Trump choose running mates from this part of the country? Well, the answer is that while some parts of the U.S. are solidly blue, meaning that they usually vote for the Democrats, and others are solidly red, meaning that they usually vote for the Republicans, the Midwest is one of those places where things can go either way. This area is mostly made up of everyday working-class Americans, so each side wants to have someone from that area who can appeal to voters. But what's this got to do with the Walz family tree? Well, the Walz family is pretty typical of a lot of Midwest families. So by going through his tree, I'll actually be explaining a bit about the history of the U.S. Midwest in general. However, before I jump into it, I gotta say, this election is shaping up to be even more divisive than the last one. It seems as if each side exists in its own echo chamber, and that voters are more concerned with hearing what they want to hear instead of simply looking at the facts. This is why I yet again asked Ground News to sponsor this video. Their platform combines all the world's news in one place. For example, after being nominated as the Democratic VP candidate, Walz became a popular figure in the media. Media on the right seemed to have taken an interest in highlighting claims suggesting a cover-up of his military record, while the left-leaning publications quoted him defending his military record. So obviously, depending on what source you read, you can end up having a totally different perspective, which is why Ground News is so, useful. They even have useful charts, these ones, to show additional data on each news source, such as whether they lean to one side politically and even where they get their funding from. It even highlights what isn't being widely covered. Thus, it can help you have more productive conversations with family and friends on contentious topics. So, with a major election approaching, Ground News is a tool that we all need. You can check it out now by going to ground.news/charts or by using the link in the description or pinned comment. Subscribe through my channel this month, and you will save 40% off unlimited access to their Vantage plan. Okay, let's now take a look at the family tree of Tim Walz. First of all, take note that the name Walz originated as a shortened form of the name Walter, which in German is Walter, meaning army commander. Tim's earliest known Walz ancestor was Franz Anton Walz, who was born in Kuppenheim, Baden, in what is today Germany, but which was then a part of the Holy Roman Empire. Interestingly, Kuppenheim is actually just a 1-hour drive away from Karlstadt, which is where the Trump family comes from. If we zoom ahead exactly 100 years, we get the birth of Franz Anton Walz's great-grandson, Sebastian Walz. By this time, the Holy Roman Empire had disintegrated, and Germany consisted of a bunch of independent monarchies, some quite small, with the Grand Duchy of Baden being one of these. In 1848, revolutions broke out throughout Europe, inspired in part by the earlier French Revolution. Basically, what happened was that the working class wanted more freedom and democracy, and in the German states, they also wanted a unified Germany to be created. However, the revolutions of 1848 failed, which resulted in many of those who had fought for change, known as 48ers, leaving Germany altogether to build new lives elsewhere. One of the countries that many 48ers fled to was the United States, particularly the Midwest, which at the time was still being settled. Sebastian Walz would have been only 5 years old in 1848, so he wasn't actually a part of the initial 48er migration. However, German migration to the U.S. continued on a large scale for many decades. So in 1867, Sebastian Walz joined the more than 6 million Germans who came to the United States during the mid to late 1800s. He initially went to Iowa, but then ended up settling in Nebraska. Now, I really want to emphasize just how widespread German ancestry is when it comes to the overall makeup of the U.S. population today. Many people tend to think of white Americans as being mostly just the descendants of British people, since English is the main language of the United States. However, although 47 million Americans do identify as having full or partial British ancestry, around 45 million Americans identify as having full or partial German ancestry. So that's actually about the same. Irish comes in third with around 39 million, and Italian fourth with 17 million. Okay, back to the tree. Once in the U.S., Sebastian married Mary Anna Berger, who was also of German descent, but whose parents had settled in Canada. Sebastian and Mary worked in Nebraska as farmers, as did their son John, who married Laura Sullivan, who was of Irish descent. John and Laura were, in turn, the parents of Raymond Walz, Tim Walz's paternal grandfather. He started out in farming as well, but then went on to become a butcher. He married Myrtle Samuelson, the daughter of Charles Samuelson. But if we go up just one more generation, you can see that Samuelson was actually an Anglicization of the Swedish name Salomonsson. You see, in Sweden, people often use patronymics as surnames. So Johann Salomonsson simply meant that Johann was the son of Salomon. Anyhow, Raymond and Myrtle had 2 children, including their only son, Jim. Here's a photo of a young Jim Walz working with his father at the meat market. Now, the Walz family has a long history of signing up for military service. John Walz signed up for the draft during World War I, and Raymond Walz signed up during World War II. When it comes to Jim Walz, well, he served overseas during the Korean War. After this, he married Darlene Rehman, with whom he had 4 children, Jeff, Sandy, Tim, and Craig. Now, before we focus on the current generation, let's quickly take a look at Tim Walz's maternal ancestors through his mom, Darlene. As I mentioned, her maiden name was Rehman, which is also of German descent. Her great-grandfather, Friedrich, being a part of the same mass migration from Germany to the American Midwest that I talked about earlier. Darlene's mother's maiden name was Reiser, which is also German. Her maternal grandfather, Frank Reiser, was the son of Nicholas Reiser, who immigrated from Luxembourg, one of the few German states that remains independent to this day. Okay, so while Tim Walz is nowadays more associated with Minnesota, he was actually born in Nebraska, just like his ancestors. This means that if he and Harris win the election, he will become the 3rd vice president to have been born in that state, the others being Gerald Ford and Dick Cheney. Anyhow, while growing up in Nebraska, Tim Walz's father, Jim, worked as a teacher and then as a school superintendent. But unfortunately, Jim developed lung cancer, and this resulted in his early death at age 54, when Tim was just 19. Darlene, Tim's mom, is still living. Okay, let me now tell you a bit about Tim Walz himself, because until very recently, he was mostly unknown on the national stage, let alone around the world. First of all, although his parents were Catholic, Walz is now a Lutheran, just like many Americans of primarily German descent. More specifically, he's a member of the mainline denomination known as the ELCA, or Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. If you watched my series on Christian denominations, you might remember that the ELCA is the more progressive of the 2 main Lutheran churches, whereas the LCMS, or Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, is the more conservative one. Anyhow, after graduating from college, Walz taught overseas in China for a year and then became a teacher in Nebraska. But then, after he met and married his wife, fellow teacher Gwen Whipple, he moved to Minnesota, which is Gwen's home state. There, they both ended up as teachers at Mankato West High School, where Tim coached football and taught social studies, which, in my opinion, as a fellow social studies educator, is pretty darn cool. It makes me wonder if we'll ever see Mr. Beat in federal politics as well. Anyway, starting at the age of 17 and continuing for the next 24 years, Walz also served in the Army National Guard, being deployed to Europe during the war in Afghanistan, and eventually rising to the rank of Command Sergeant Major. In 2006, he switched gears and decided to run for Congress as a candidate for the Democratic Farmer Labor Party, or DFL. Now, I should point out that in most U.S. states, they have the same parties that exist at the federal level, the Republicans on the right and the Democrats on the left. However, in 2 states, this is not the case, Minnesota being one of them. You see, during the first part of the 20th century, a third party called the Farmer Labor Party became quite popular there, eventually merging with the Democrats to become the DFL. A similar thing happened in North Dakota, where they now have the Democratic Nonpartisan League Party, or DNLP. Walz was actually a bit of a long shot when he first ran for Congress, because his district was mostly right-leaning, but he surprised everyone by easily defeating the long-term incumbent. He then went on to represent his district for the next 12 years, up until 2019, which is when he became Minnesota's governor. That's the job he currently holds. On the personal side of things, he's the father of 2 children, Hope, who's 23, and a recent graduate of Montana State University, as well as Gus, who's 17 and in high school. Sadly, the family lost Tim's brother Craig in 2016 during a camping trip when a strong storm moved in, resulting in a terrible accident. All right, so it's yet to be seen whether or not Tim Walz will become the 50th Vice President of the United States. What do you think will happen in November? Will we see the return of Trump, or will the U.S. get its first ever female president? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to check out Ground News by using the link in the description. Thanks for watching.